Is there a big difference between them all? And is the generalized more the one that we're mostly aware of?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of the capture all category of when stress turns to anxiety and it becomes a little bit chronic anxiety. But you're right, those are four. There's actually a couple of others as well. There's a panic disorder, and people with panic disorder, their anxiety tends to trigger panic attacks, and those can be very overwhelming, and panic attacks are very different from just feeling anxiety. There's the generalized anxiety disorder. There's social anxiety, where my anxiety is triggered primarily by my fear or worry of how I'm going to present myself in social situations. It's a fear of judgment, a fear of perception of how people are going to see me. So it can be associated with some shyness or withdrawnness, but primarily social situations set my anxiety off. And then there's obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD as it's more commonly known as, which fits under that anxiety category, which can be very challenging. And then post-traumatic stress disorder, which is anxiety that comes from having had a highly emotional or traumatic experience at some point, childhood abuse or neglect, or a car accident, or an attack by a dog, something like that, that now kind of sets off or triggers anxiety whenever there is a familiar trigger, a smell, a sound, a sight that kind of resurrects that old trauma, and then I can take on a very hyper anxious state in my mind and feel quite a bit of anxiety. And they all are very distinct, and but there's common threads of the symptomology that fit all of them.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good to know that too. Are any of those more linked to a chemical imbalance or something you were born with than circumstantial? I imagine the PTSD, if I said that right, that's more, circumstance, something that's taken place in your life, correct?
Right.
Can a panic disorder be something that's more genetic or that you kind of come by, or do most of them come from circumstantial?
Well, there's no question that circumstance or environment can trigger them. And set them off. Usually people with anxiety disorders can function fairly well when they're managing life well, where life is pretty predictable and it's not overwhelming and they're in a safe environment. Then we all can kind of regulate our emotions better. But when we add stress or change or loss or transition to the mix, then it percolates our anxiety, and all of those disorders kind of get triggered. So OCD would be one that tends to have more of kind of a genetic history to it, and can absolutely be activated by high amounts of stress and anxiety. Panic disorder really kind of evolves when my stress level and my body gets flooded with those stress hormones, and I have a flood. Then generally it's my thinking that can create a panic attack. Social anxiety is a little more genetic based, and that generalized anxiety is probably more genetic based as well. But it's interesting, what really can lead to anxiety producing panic attacks is the way we think about our anxiousness. And so going back to your question, can we use some of that healthy anxiety to drive us and motivate us? Yes, absolutely. Oftentimes the trigger for whether that becomes unhealthy anxiety or motivating, stress and anxiety is simply our thought patterns. And there's research that shows people that when they start to feel anxious, have this kind of compassionate self-talk with themselves. This is just my body preparing me to manage the task in front of me. I've got this adrenaline rush is just the energy I need to kind of do well or perform well. I'm feeling a little bit anxious because I have some high expectations of the situation. If I can talk to myself that way, kind of be friendly with myself around my anxiety, then I'm probably going to be able to manage it fairly well. But what most of us do, and especially those that struggle with anxiety disorders, is we have those anxious thoughts and we go to catastrophic thinking. We go to, it becomes a worry. Oh no, I've got this on my plate, or I've got to do this. And then we convert that into what if thinking. What if this happens, and what if that happens? And we go down this narrow path of all of the negative possibilities of the outcome. And that leads oftentimes then to some real catastrophic, oh no, what if this happens? And then it leads to this. And so we just kind of create this pathway of negativity that makes us become convinced that our worst case scenarios are probably going to happen. And the whole time we're thinking this, our fight or flight center is flooding us with stress hormones going, oh my word, you're going to need more stress hormone because the world is coming to an end, you know? And the next thing we know, our body is overwhelmed with stress hormone, and we can start to pay attention to those symptoms. Oh my word, my heart's pounding like crazy. Am I going to stop breathing? I feel like my heart's beating out of my chest. And that ends up flooding our system with more stress hormone. And pretty soon now our system's on overload and it doesn't know anything else to do but to kind of hit the overdrive button of a panic attack. And that can be pretty scary. And we oftentimes think that, boy, I need to go to the ER. I'm going to die. I can't breathe. I'm going to have a heart attack. But generally speaking, it's just your body being flooded with tons of that stress hormone that's in moderation is meant to be helpful and productive, but in excess can really shut us down.
I mean, what you just kind of described right there is really the power of our thoughts.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you're allowing that stress to take you over and you're just right inside those thoughts and believing those thoughts, it can physically cause you to feel like you can't breathe. It can physically cause you to feel like I'm having a heart attack. I need to go to the emergency room. And
right.
That takes us right into this next part that I wanted to ask you. Is there preventative measures that we can take besides medication?
Yeah.
To help with anxiety. And I know there are, I mean, you just said right there, positive affirmations, being able to talk to ourselves, that positive self-talk is so powerful. So do you want to share more on what we can do as preventative measures when we feel that anxiety coming on?
You bet. Yeah. Well, when we talk about the basics, I always like to teach people, you know, that self-care we talked about earlier. Fundamentally, if I work on doing that incrementally every day, then I really, it's almost like I keep my stress level in a manageable range. And that has to do with making sure I'm getting a good night's sleep. All of the research shows that sleep disruption, even if I just have a couple of nights where I wake up and lose an hour and a half of sleep, or I have a hard time falling asleep, it throws us into that emotional center of our brain. Our fight or flight center kind of kicks on and starts to percolate some of the stress hormone, and we lose our ability to think as, you know, more logically and rationally. And so sleep, making sure you're exercising or recreating regularly or frequently, just taking some time to kind of burn off the stress hormone. Socializing, interacting with people is a vital part of regulating stress, primarily because when we get stressed out, we tend to want to withdraw. People become annoying. And so we're left then with our own perceptions in our brain of our world or what people are saying or doing. And we don't have anybody to kind of give us checks and balances. Sitting down with somebody socially and going, oh my word, you're not going to believe how stressed I am. I've got this going on. I've got this going on. And somebody going, oh, I totally know how you feel. I went through that last week or last year. All of a sudden relating to somebody helps us go, wait a minute. Okay, other people have felt this. Other people have been through this, or they've got some tips on managing it. So that socializing piece, and then making sure you're eating, fairly healthy and consistent meals. One of the things we do when we're stressed out, again, is avoid self-care, and sleep, eating, socializing, recreating are all part of self-care. So those are kind of the basics. But then beyond that, some of the helpful resources are making sure that you are watching, being a good consumer of your thoughts. Those thought patterns can be pretty negative and self-destructive. In my anxious state, I'm far more prone to assume the worst and think the worst than I am when I'm relaxed and mindful. So watching my thinking. And when I start to feel that stress hormone kick on and my anxious symptoms, you know, the first place of intervention is to normalize that and just really start talking to myself compassionately. Oh, I'm starting to feel a little stressed. It's probably because I've got this and that going on. Little stress is normal. It's no big deal. Instead of, oh no, oh my word, here I go. I'm getting stressed. It's going to be one of those days, right? Mm-hmm. So I tell people all the time, talk to yourself compassionately. If you sat down with a friend and said, I am going crazy with stress right now, the last thing your friend would say is, oh my world, your world's going to come to an end. You've got this, no, they would say, what's going on? Tell me about it. You've got this, you can handle it. It's no big deal. We all go through that. Let me help you out. Well, when we talk to ourselves that way, it starts that calming process. The next step is breathing. We talked about that restrictive process of stress. One of the things that we forget to do when we're stressed is deep breathing. It's all about constrictive. My heart's beating fast. I'm hyperventilating type breathing, right?
Yeah.
But deep diaphragmatic breathing for women who have had babies and done the kind of the Lamaze breathing, it's that type of breathing where I'm feeling my lungs full of air. I'm holding that breath for a couple of seconds, breathing in through my nose and slowly out through my mouth. Now, why is that breathing important? Well, all of the research shows us 10 of those breaths 10 times a day is very effective in reducing or eliminating a lot of anxiety or anxiety attacks.
Wow.
And the primary reason why, two things that's important with that is number one, when I can do 10 of those deep breaths, if I do them right, and you can Google diaphragmatic breathing or anxious breathing, what happens is I change the biology of my body. I start to slow my heart rate down because the breathing starts to regulate my heart. And when my heart rate starts slowing down to kind of a resting heart rate, it actually sends a signal up to my brain, to that fight or flight center, that says, hey, shut off the production of stress hormone. We've got this under control. So my brain actually slows down or stops producing the very hormone that is making me feel stressed. And once that happens, now my brain can start to plug back into logical, rational thinking. And I can start going, wait a minute, perspective is being restored. I can handle this. The world's not coming to an end. I don't have 40 million things I have to do right now in this moment. And we can kind of restore perspective. So that breathing piece is important. If we branch off from that breathing piece, mindfulness or meditation or yoga are all kind of self-centering tools or techniques that have a huge positive impact on anxiousness, stress, anxiety, those types of disorders, because it teaches us to live or be in the present moment. It teaches us to focus on what is instead of what could be in terms of my worries and my what-if thinking. So there are lots of great, there's some great apps, like Headspace is a great app I refer a lot of clients to. The 8-week mindfulness program. There's a great website that's called healthjourneys.com that has a lot of meditation and mindfulness downloads that will actually teach you the process of breathing and being mindful and meditating. All of that stuff is very proactive, wellness-based stuff that really does help impact anxiety. And then making sure you're exercising and recreating, taking that time to do that. I always tell people, if you're going to do that and you want the maximum benefit of it, then don't do it with your anxiety. Don't take your stress with you. So I make the mistake, I do run marathons and train. I'll make the mistake when I'm stressed of using runs, 8-mile runs, 10-mile runs, to process my anxiety. I've got this to do. I've got that. This happened. I wasn't happy with that. And what happens is the benefit of recreating or exercise is lost because all I've done is process my stress and anxiety. I might get a little boost hormonally from the exercising, but I usually finish my workout as stressed as I was when I left. So I jokingly tell people, I don't take my boss on runs with me.
Yeah.
I don't think about my work on runs. If I'm going to stress about work, I'm going to be paid to do it. I'll do it at work. But while I'm on runs, I'm going to leave all that stuff behind. So I completely decompress. I set that down, and it might feel like a huge load that I'm lifting off my shoulders when I go to work out. And my brain says, you don't have the time to do this. This load needs to be taken care of. You need to address all of these problems on your shoulders. And I'll talk back to my brain and say, no, I actually need this if I'm going to take care of that. I have to take care of myself first. I'll set that down metaphorically, and I'll go for a run. And I'll come back, and what looked like, a 10-foot high pile of stress and anxiety that I have to do that day now looks like a handful of things that are manageable. And I go, oh my word, why was I so bent out of shape about this? And why didn't I think about this resource for managing that instead? So that stuff kind of helps shift perspective. But if you're going to do any of those activities that are geared towards good self-care, you have to do them with the intent of leaving the anxiety and stress behind, or they detract from the benefits of that.
That was really good, because I know there's been many times that I've done that same thing where I'm like, I just need to go to yoga. I'm just going to go to yoga. And then the whole time I'm in yoga, my mind's not listening to her. I'm just following her in the mirror, but I'm thinking of everything I got to do. And I get home and I'm like, that didn't really help. That's powerful. And it's being conscious of that, because our subconscious will naturally go there, I imagine.
You're right. Yeah. So, you're right. It's being conscious, and it's doing it with purpose. That's one of the things I love about stress management is you're just telling yourself, I'm going to start living a more purposeful life. Anxiety takes away our purpose. We become driven by, I have to, it needs to be done. I've got to do this, instead of I'm choosing to do it and I'm mindfully doing it. So doing anything with purpose shifts the benefit more positively so that I can absorb the purpose. Oh, I just engaged in even connecting with a spouse. You know, I find myself, I need to have a conversation with my wife, and my brain is going, okay, I've got this to do and this to do. How much longer is she going to tell me about this conversation with her friend? I'm not present. I'm not mindful. It's of no benefit relationship wise. But I catch myself, and I do. I jokingly sometimes one of my daughters was talkative and a little bit of a drama queen, and I would sometimes jokingly say to her, "Are you going to write a book about this that I can just read later? Because I've only got like 15 minutes, you know." But I've learned to shift that and tell myself there is nothing more important than me being in this moment, listening to this conversation right now. And when I give myself permission to do that, to step away from my stress or my anxiety or my own schedule, it is meaningful. It takes on meaning, and there's connection that takes place. The same thing happens with exercise or recreating in the outdoors. All of a sudden, it takes on purpose. It takes on meaning. There's fulfillment. We notice things we wouldn't notice. You know, I love to run with friends because it's decompressing, as long as we're not talking about their marriage and their relationships or mine. But if we do it with service, that's right. When we do anything with purpose, the benefit of it is maximized. It's fulfilling.
Oh, I like that. I like that. And everything you just talked about with the preventative, you know, all the different, basically, self-care is so important for us. And I think women in general, because our natural DNA, I have found through my studies, is we give, we adapt, we give, to the point of exhaustion.
You're exactly right.
And to the point that we're getting burned out and we have nothing left to give. And then what we do give is not really helping anyone. It's not giving full-heartedly. We got to make sure we give back to ourselves, that self-care.
Yeah, it's vital. Yeah, primarily because our brain becomes habituated to, what I need to do in order to not feel stressed is meet everybody else's needs. And we neglect ourselves, or we tell ourselves, I'll take care of me when everybody else is taken care of. And then when we get in a pattern of that behavior, and we actually do give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, the emotion that we feel is not what we expect. We don't go, I just took 3 hours and spent it on myself. Generally speaking, we go, that I feel so guilty. There were so many things I should have done. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't give myself, I'm going to go back to taking care of everybody else because now I feel bad about it. And the analogy I usually use is there's a very big difference between appropriate guilt and inappropriate guilt. You know, appropriate guilt is when I've done something wrong and I need to remedy or fix the situation so that I can feel better about it. But inappropriate guilt is when we feel guilty about not having done something that we should be doing. So an example of that is, let's say I haven't exercised in 6 months, and I finally give myself permission to do that. And I go to the gym and I have a good workout, and it's difficult and it's challenging because I haven't been there in 6 months and I'm not in shape and it doesn't feel super good, but I tell myself, well, at least I went. I'm feeling good about that. And I go home that night and I go to bed and I wake up the next morning and my body is absolutely screaming at me. I'm sore. Inappropriate guilt would be me saying, this is my body telling me that working out is not good for me because it's painful. So I am never going to go to the gym again, and then I won't have to feel the pain.
Yeah.
And what your body is actually saying is, if you would do this more consistently, we would feel really good about it. It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
But the fact that you've neglected this makes it painful. So when we engage in that self-care or purposeful living, oftentimes that process is how we think about it. We've got to give ourselves permission to say, no, I know I feel guilty about doing this, but it's inappropriate guilt because I'm just not used to it. My self-esteem or my sense of purpose has come for the last 5 years at taking care of everybody else, or never saying no, or always working to please, or feeling like I've got to be perfect. And now that I'm changing that and taking care of myself, I've got to validate that this is what I need to be doing more consistently.
Yeah. And then in the end, we're going to be able to give a more healthier version of us to all around us. I mean, everyone will be affected in a happier way by us taking care of ourselves first. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. It's the only way we can do what we need to do, really.
Okay.
Because it's twisted thinking. We think I'm just gonna, and anxiety drives this, because when we're anxious and stressed, our brain actually shifts and it says, I need more control over my life. If I can just control everything and everybody, then I'll feel less stressed. But what we know is the reality is there's only a small portion of our life that we have control over, our thoughts, actions, behavior, us, right? Our brain doesn't want to believe that. What it wants to believe is that if I just control everybody else, then I can feel less stressed. And so we put everything and everybody else first, thinking that it's going to reduce our stress. And eventually it just simply burns us out and wears us down. So you're absolutely right. The reverse model is true. If I put myself first on my to-do list, if I meet my needs first, I reset, I decompress, I now have the energy and motivation to do what I need to do. And I can do it authentically now. I can enjoy it because I feel good about myself. And that's the appropriate stress management model, is me first, not in a selfish way, but in an effective way, that everybody gets the best of me when I feel good about myself. If I don't, then nobody gets that authentic part of me that feels like I love doing this. I want to be doing it. No, I'm doing it because it's on my list and I just need to get it off my list.
Yeah. I think it's quite easy for our family to recognize burnout giving. I think there's a piece, I know for me, there's a piece of a snide remark or something that I might say, yeah, I'm giving it to you. I'm not, whatever it might be, that it's not going to be.
Right.
Yeah. They feel it. I can tell when, if there's something I need from my husband, he's like rolling his eyes going, I just don't have time for this right now, but they do it grudgingly. So yeah.
Right.
I love this. This is powerful reminder of how important it is to take care of ourselves. So powerful.
Yeah.
What do you feel like is the accumulating effect of why anxiety seems to be growing? You hear so much more about it, and even in our kids, I'm hearing even more about kids. Obviously, you've got, the ADD and ADHD that you hear about more than we've ever heard before. Maybe it was because we didn't label it then. We didn't know maybe, but do you feel like there's something in our society that is, you mentioned before, the whole wide world is right at our fingertips at all times. So that has to add some for sure. But is there anything else? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's apparent to me as a therapist that I am seeing, and colleagues of mine are seeing far more, anxious-based clients, and I think a big part of it, especially with our youth, is just the exposure on social media to the world. Whether that's their friends' world, or whether that's the political world, or whether that's the weather world of Hurricane Harvey. It's just all in our laps anymore. We used to have to work pretty hard, to sit down and open a newspaper and read the newspaper, or turn on the news, that only the 6 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news rather than the 24-hour news, right? So it's in our laps now. And at a younger age, kids are savvy. They are curious, and they're getting those media links to all kinds of tragedy and whatnot. And so our sense of safety, I think, has diminished substantially. Our emotional well-being in the world, there's a lot of unrest. And again, when we're in our illogical and irrational brain, I work a lot with kids, and I'm always curious when they come in with kind of fears and phobias, let's say about the weather, and they've watched a tornado hit, Kansas on the news, and now they're can't sleep at night because they're convinced that a tornado is going to hit St. George. Well, how many tornadoes have we registered here in St. George? And when's the last time you saw your neighbor's house? Well, they don't plug into logical, rational thinking. It's just, I saw it and it's real and it could happen. And so we become poor consumers of our own thinking, and that adds to it. But so I think a big part of it is just how connected we are to the world. I think another part of it is just how driven we are now as a culture and as a society. Those expectations of being the best and being the best at the youngest age, and being accomplished by a certain time and having all of life figured out. There's nobody that is providing some checks and balances about the reality of that and what is appropriate. And I see college students all the time that first year in college, and they feel like they're complete failures because they haven't figured out their major yet, and they didn't take AP classes, so they've got a full 4 years, and they feel like they're already behind. And like, where do those expectations come from? Well, my friends in high school all took AP classes and have 20 credits, or they all seem to know what they're doing. Well, okay, that isn't necessarily your reality. And so backing off of some of those expectations. But I just think that high pressured sense of we've got to be everything and accomplish everything now in a short amount of time puts extreme pressure on us. And I just think as a culture, we're busier, we are more productive. There is technology that helps with all of that, but it also creates this fast-paced world of us feeling like we can't take time for ourselves. We can't be purposeful about what we do. It all has to be accomplished now and in excessive quantities. And, I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the reality of it is we're on this big blue ball in the universe to learn and also have enjoyment, to have happiness in our lives.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, why would we want to be here if that wasn't an underlining, cause that we should desire?
Yeah, you're right.